Blake Lively's story took a shocking turn when whispers began circulating that she had developed real feelings for her It Ends With Us co-star, Justin Baldoni. What may have started as on-screen chemistry appeared to spill over into something deeper, sparking speculation that their connection went far beyond professional boundaries. For Ryan Reynolds, this revelation was nothing short of devastating. Reports suggest that Ryan spiraled into a complete meltdown once he realized his wife may have harbored genuine emotions for Baldoni from the very beginning. Insiders claim his reaction was explosive, with him allegedly saying things like, "I will burn down my entire house. I will burn down your career." This raises a haunting question. Was Blake Lively simply playing the role of the picture-perfect wife in a marriage built more on image than intimacy? Some critics argue that her relationship with Ryan has always been less about love and more about optics, producing children, maintaining a polished Hollywood brand, and preserving the illusion of perfection. Behind closed doors, however, things were far from perfect. What the public saw as a glamorous marriage was, according to whispers, a relationship weighed down by control, insecurity, and ego. Blake's growing bond with Baldoni may have been the spark, but Ryan's reaction turned it into a wildfire. Their dynamic quickly became a ticking time bomb. Living under the shadow of swirling rumors, with speculation about Ryan's true identity and Blake's emotional needs unmet, the cracks in their marriage grew impossible to ignore. By the time she and Baldoni's friendship deepened, it wasn't just Hollywood gossip, it became a full-blown scandal. On set, Blake and Justin were tasked with portraying characters who fall deeply in love. But as so often happens in Hollywood, the line between acting and reality blurred. Industry voices, including those featured in the documentary He Said, She Said, Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni, noted how authentic their bond appeared long before Blake ever accused Baldoni of misconduct. While she later framed him as crossing boundaries, he denied the allegations, countering with claims of extortion and defamation. Many observers believe that the legal chaos wasn't about harassment at all, but rather about an emotional affair that grew too real, one that blindsided both Baldoni and Ryan Reynolds. After all, it's hard to reconcile accusations of harassment with the fact that Blake allegedly invited Baldoni to her penthouse, even allowing him to hold her baby. As the fallout spread, Ryan's role became increasingly undeniable. Sources argue that rather than being a passive bystander, he was the driving force behind the lawsuit. To Ryan, Blake's attachment to Baldoni wasn't just betrayal. It was an attack on his carefully constructed image as Hollywood's charming, untouchable family man. Instead of treating the lawsuit as a serious legal matter, Ryan allegedly weaponized it as a way to regain control, a power move against both Blake and Baldoni. Insiders say his behavior revealed a darker, more manipulative side. "I will burn down your career, my career, and inflict pain on everyone if that's what it takes." This wasn't about justice. This wasn't about truth. It was about ego. Ryan's priority seemed to be preserving the flawless brand he had built, even if it meant dragging his wife, her co-star, and himself through a destructive public spectacle. The tragedy is that such a lawsuit was never truly winnable. Legal experts labeled it chaotic, unwieldy, and damaging for everyone involved, especially for the Reynolds-Lively household. What Ryan may have thought would restore control only exposed the fractures in his marriage and tarnished the image he fought so hard to protect. Behind the witty interviews and carefully curated social media posts, the truth began to surface. A marriage weighed down by control, insecurity, and an ego unwilling to let go. And with every new revelation, Ryan's insistence on dictating both the public and private narrative only pushed his family further into chaos. In the end, what began as whispers of on-set chemistry spiraled into allegations, lawsuits, and a Hollywood scandal that may leave permanent scars on everyone involved. For Ryan, it wasn't just about losing Blake's affection. It was about losing control. And that's something he was never willing to accept. Blake Lively's name has always carried weight in Hollywood. From her breakout role on Gossip Girl to her transformation into one of the most recognized red carpet icons of her generation, she cultivated an image of the perfect actress, wife, and mother. Her marriage to Ryan Reynolds, often paraded as Hollywood's dream union, cemented that image. Social media gushed over their playful banter, their carefully staged appearances, and their shared branding as the internet's favorite couple. But behind that glossy exterior, cracks were forming. Cracks that widened into a very public storm, once whispers of an emotional affair with co-star Justin Baldoni surfaced. What began as speculation spiraled into lawsuits, accusations, and media narratives so tangled that even the most loyal fans were forced to question what was real and what was performance. At the center of this storm sits not only Blake Lively, but Ryan Reynolds himself, a man long known for his sharp wit, his perfectly curated charm, and his relentless control over his public image. To some, Reynolds has always been the embodiment of the lovable rogue, the actor who could disarm any critic with a smirk and a self-deprecating joke. But as commentators like Candace Owens have pointed out, beneath the jokes lies a man deeply insecure, fiercely possessive, and perhaps far more controlling than the public ever realized. According to Owens, the lawsuit and smear campaign against Baldoni were never about defending Blake's honor or marriage. They were about protecting Reynolds' fragile ego. Owens and others have argued that Reynolds is less concerned with his wife's alleged betrayal than with his own image. The emotional affair, they claim, struck at the heart of the brand he had so carefully constructed, the funny, devoted family man with the perfect wife at his side. When that narrative was threatened, his response was not reconciliation, but retaliation. Reports suggest that Reynolds and his team strategically leaked stories to media outlets, including the New York Times, framing Baldoni as predatory and manipulative. According to critics, this was no coincidence, but rather a coordinated effort to destroy Baldoni's reputation before he could defend himself. Candace Owens went further, suggesting Reynolds doesn't truly care if his actions harm his wife or children. His primary goal is preserving his own control. The lawsuit, the headlines, the media frenzy, all of it served to distract from the real story of a man terrified of losing the carefully manufactured narrative that made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. If Owens is correct, Reynolds' behavior reveals not only a lack of concern for Blake, but also a willingness to sacrifice her reputation to maintain his own. Blake Lively, meanwhile, is hardly painted as innocent. While Owens and others stress that she was not a victim of harassment or predation by Baldoni, they acknowledge her role in cultivating an emotional bond that crossed boundaries of her marriage. Yet, rather than framing her as the sole culprit, critics point to a larger pattern in her life and career. Blake has often formed deep attachments with her co-stars, whether it was Penn Badgley during her Gossip Girl years, Ben Affleck during The Town, or Leonardo DiCaprio during their brief but highly publicized relationship. Each connection fueled speculation that she sought not just professional partnerships, but emotional fulfillment from the men she worked closely with. That pattern, critics argue, reached a boiling point with Baldoni. Unlike fleeting flings or casual connections, this bond reportedly struck deeper, perhaps because Blake was already deeply dissatisfied in her marriage. For years, she had stood beside Reynolds as the picture-perfect wife, smiling for cameras, enduring his endless stream of public jokes at her expense, and maintaining the illusion of domestic bliss. But behind the scenes, sources suggest she felt unseen, diminished, and trapped in a marriage that prioritized image over intimacy. This is where the accusations against Reynolds grow darker. Observers note that his public jokes about Blake, about her looks, about their children, even about their sex life, were often less humorous than humiliating. To the public, they were harmless banter. But to those who looked deeper, they revealed a troubling dynamic. A man so committed to appearing witty that he belittled his own wife for laughs. Owens herself commented that if her husband ever spoke about her the way Reynolds routinely spoke about Blake, she would be devastated. To her, this was not humor, but a symptom of a deeper lack of respect. As Reynolds allegedly funneled his affection into his long-standing friendship with Hugh Jackman, often gushing about him with warmth he never displayed for Blake, speculation grew. Could it be that Reynolds' marriage was less about love and more about appearances? Was Blake Lively, as some suggested, little more than a beard, her role reduced to maintaining the image of a perfect Hollywood family, while Reynolds privately pursued other emotional needs? The idea gained traction as fans compared Reynolds' glowing praise of Jackman to his cold jabs at his wife. Here were two men, now in their late 40s and 50s, bantering like lifelong companions, their bond seemingly deeper and more genuine than the marriage Reynolds flaunted for cameras. To some, this was simply friendship. To others, it hinted at a hidden truth Reynolds was desperate to obscure, even at the cost of destroying Baldoni's career. If Blake truly served as a beard, as critics propose, then her emotional bond with Baldoni becomes easier to understand. In Baldoni, she reportedly found someone who saw her not as a symbol, not as a polished piece of Reynolds' brand, but as a woman with needs, vulnerabilities, and desires. Their connection, while not physical, was a rebellion against the role she had been forced to play, a role that required her to smile, nod, and endure while her husband controlled the narrative of their lives. And that is precisely why, according to Owens, Reynolds reacted with such fury. The lawsuit, the media spin, the smear campaign, these were not about love, nor about betrayal. They were about control. For Reynolds, Baldoni represented a threat not only to his marriage, but to the image he had built. A devoted wife leaving him for another man would shatter the illusion of the perfect Hollywood power couple. A co-star stealing his wife's heart would undermine his carefully curated dominance. And so, rather than face the truth of a marriage crumbling under the weight of emotional neglect, he turned his wrath outward, targeting Baldoni with legal and media weapons. The tragedy, of course, is that Blake herself seems to have been caught in the middle of this destructive battle. While she is not absolved of responsibility, her role in the saga reflects a woman stuck between a marriage built on control and an emotional connection that offered her genuine acknowledgement. Critics argue that by standing beside Reynolds in his campaign against Baldoni, she essentially aided in her own silencing, aligning with a man who valued control more than her happiness. Whether this was loyalty, fear, or calculation remains unclear, but the question persists. Why did this all escalate into such chaos? Why not handle it privately, away from the glare of Hollywood and media? The answer may lie in Reynolds' obsession with narrative. For years, he has weaponized humor, PR, and media coverage to craft his identity. To admit weakness, betrayal, or insecurity would be to admit he is not in control. And for Reynolds, control is everything. Without it, the witty mask slips, and the world sees the man beneath, vulnerable, insecure, and desperate to hold on to an image that is slipping away. The fallout of this saga will likely reverberate for years. Whether or not the lawsuit succeeds, the court of public opinion has already begun its deliberations. For some, Reynolds remains the beloved actor whose humor carried franchises and charmed audiences. For others, he has revealed himself as manipulative, vindictive, and deeply insecure. Blake Lively, once the darling of Hollywood romance, now faces scrutiny over her emotional choices, her loyalty, and her role as both participant and pawn in her husband's game. And Baldoni, the man at the center of this storm, may find his career forever tainted by a smear campaign he never saw coming. What is clear is that this is no longer just a story about an emotional affair. It is a story about power, control, and the lengths people will go to protect their image. It is a story about the fragility behind Hollywood's most polished couples, and the uncomfortable truth that the marriages we idolize may be nothing more than illusions propped up by PR machines. Most of all, it is a story that reminds us how easily perception can be manipulated, and how, in the end, those who control the narrative often control the truth. For years, whispers have circulated about Hugh Jackman's personal life, with rumors suggesting he may have hidden relationships with men. Against that backdrop, Ryan Reynolds' behavior toward Jackman has raised eyebrows. He doesn't just praise Jackman as a colleague, he gushes over him with a sincerity and warmth that goes far beyond typical Hollywood camaraderie. Reynolds has called Jackman the kindest man in the industry, and even confessed that their friendship was the best part of his career. These aren't casual compliments, they sound like deep, emotional admissions. In fact, Reynolds once compared his bond with Jackman to a marriage, saying the secret to their friendship was not so different from the ingredients of a lasting romantic partnership. He even described Jackman as his bromance, playfully tossing out jokes that often carried flirtatious undertones. Fans laughed, but many couldn't help but wonder if there was something more than humor behind the remarks. After all, in Hollywood, blurred lines are often part of the game. What makes this even more striking is the way Reynolds speaks about his wife, Blake Lively. His public comments about her often sound detached or delivered with a layer of sarcasm, as though affection is something he can't fully express when it comes to her. Compare that to his glowing admiration for Jackman, and the contrast is glaring. With Hugh, Reynolds radiates ease and affection. With Blake, he often projects coldness or dismissiveness. This disparity has fueled speculation that Reynolds may be suppressing his true feelings. Could his bond with Jackman reveal deeper truths about his inner life? Some observers suggest his fixation on Jackman and his need to control Blake are connected, pointing to a man grappling with unresolved personal struggles beneath the polished surface of Hollywood's favorite funny guy. Their friendship dates back to 2008, when Reynolds joined the X-Men Origins Wolverine cast. Reynolds has recalled being nervous and overwhelmed on set until Jackman approached him, called out his name, gave him a hug, and welcomed him aboard. Since then, they've been inseparable, leaning on each other for advice, support, and even what Jackman has described as their deepest fears. Jackman once said, "You can tell me anything and I can tell you anything, without judgment." Strikingly, Reynolds has never described his marriage to Blake Lively in such terms. That absence of intimacy with his wife is telling. The way Reynolds shares his vulnerabilities with Jackman, essentially like pillow talk, suggests a closeness he doesn't share at home. In fact, while Reynolds has made countless jokes at Blake's expense, he's publicly celebrated Jackman with warmth, sincerity, and even adoration. That imbalance only deepens the speculation about where his true affections lie. Meanwhile, Blake Lively is hardly passive in this story. While Candace Owens and other commentators argue that Reynolds' possessiveness and insecurity fuel the chaos, they also point out that Blake herself is far from innocent. Her emotional affair with Justin Baldoni developed gradually on the set of It Ends With Us, blossoming into a bond that gave her something she lacked in her marriage: genuine validation and a sense of being seen. To Ryan, her attachment to Baldoni may have felt like betrayal. But from Blake's perspective, it was less about infidelity and more about finding someone who gave her the emotional connection she wasn't getting from her husband. In Baldoni, she found warmth and attention, qualities Reynolds seemed to reserve for Hugh Jackman rather than his own wife. Owens argues that Blake's role in this saga complicates the victim narrative the public often assigns her. While she may not have orchestrated the lawsuit or media attacks, she actively nurtured her relationship with Baldoni, making her more complicit than she appears. Her emotional choices helped set the stage for the public meltdown between herself, Reynolds, and Baldoni. At the same time, the public performances between Reynolds and Jackman only add to the confusion. Their over-the-top jokes, from fake kisses on camera to exaggerated flirtations, blur the line between comedy and truth. For some, it's harmless fun. For others, it's a clear signal of something deeper, something Reynolds has worked hard to keep hidden. Blake Lively's emotional affair becomes even more significant in this light. Was it simply about personal dissatisfaction? Or was it also a reaction to being sidelined in her own marriage, forced to watch her husband pour more tenderness into his bromance than into their relationship? In that context, her connection with Baldoni looks less like a betrayal and more like a rebellion against a marriage built on control and public image. And that's what makes this entire saga so complicated. Ryan Reynolds may be fighting to preserve his Hollywood brand, but in doing so, he exposes the fractures in his marriage and the possibility that his carefully constructed persona hides much deeper struggles. Blake Lively, meanwhile, isn't merely a victim of her husband's insecurities. She's an active participant who sought emotional refuge elsewhere. Together, their choices have created a tangled web of rumors, speculation, and betrayal that continues to capture Hollywood's attention. So when you put it all together, Reynolds' obsession with Jackman, his coldness toward Blake, her attachment to Baldoni, and the legal battle that followed, the story feels less like a simple love triangle and more like a public unraveling of carefully guarded secrets. Whether this is about love, control, or hidden truths, one thing is clear: there's far more to this saga than Hollywood wants you to believe. As we wrap up this deep dive into the tangled dynamics between Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, Hugh Jackman, and Justin Baldoni, one thing becomes crystal clear: Hollywood is never just what it seems on the surface. Behind the red carpets, photo ops, and carefully curated interviews, there are layers of unspoken truths, emotional struggles, and relationships far more complicated than the public ever realizes. Ryan's profound connection with Hugh Jackman has raised more questions than answers, leaving fans speculating whether their bond goes beyond friendship or simply reflects an unusually deep level of trust and affection. At the same time, his strained and sometimes distant demeanor toward Blake Lively in public has only fueled rumors that their marriage may be less about love and more about appearances. On the other hand, Blake's emotional connection with Justin Baldoni reminds us that even those we perceive as victims in the Hollywood spotlight can play active roles in shaping the narrative behind the scenes. Her search for validation and intimacy beyond her marriage paints a picture of a woman caught between loyalty, desire, and the heavy weight of public perception. What's most striking here is how these personal entanglements spill over into professional lives and public images. Every word, every smile, every interaction becomes a puzzle piece in a larger story, one that fans and critics are constantly trying to solve. At the end of the day, this saga isn't just about celebrity gossip. It's about the hidden emotional battles that so many of us fight, only magnified under the glaring lights of fame. So the question remains, are we seeing the truth, or only the version of it they want us to believe? What do you think?